Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, another off day for the Dodgers, another mailbag episode for us. There's some questions about James Outman. There's some questions about the starting rotation. And as always, around this time, there's questions about the trade deadline. We're going to get into all of that. That's what's on tap. So make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This is the daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube if you search for Locked On Dodgers. And if you want to join the Everydayers, which is the group of people that listen to Locked On Dodgers every day, all you have to do is listen every day. And to make it easier to do that, you can subscribe wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, and you will get the notification when our episode is live. So go ahead and do that right now. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Samperio. That's my co-host, Jeff Snider. We're both lifelong Dodger fans. We've both been around the Dodgers most of our lives, sometimes in the capacity where we cover the team, sometimes in the capacity where we have spent time in the clubhouse and locker room, but mostly in the capacity of being fans that are knowledgeable, I would say. And, that's where we're at now. And we're here to bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Jeff, how's it going?
Good. I'm excited for this one. We got a lot of good questions.
Yeah, once again, you guys are killing it with questions this year for mailbags. We're not, before we would get a lot of the same questions, which would make sense in some cases, and in some cases, maybe beating the dead horse. But we haven't got to that point yet. We're getting a lot of variety in questions and a lot of different questions. So, with that being said, let's jump in right into those questions. And this one is an interesting concept that I've seen on social media and now in the form of a question from Danny at ITFDB626. He says, would trading for JD Martinez at last year's trade deadline have made a difference in the series against San Diego?
Yeah, it is an interesting idea. It definitely, overall, the problem with the Dodgers wasn't a lack of good hitters, is that their good hitters didn't get hits in key moments. But they also did have, they had some at-bats that were taken by guys who, in a perfect world, probably wouldn't have been. Trace Thompson was really struggling. Cody Bellinger ended up on the bench for Trace Thompson. And it's like, well, which one of our guys who can't hit should we send up to the plate? And, maybe having JD Martinez would have helped there. I can't go so far as to say it definitely would have, because the Dodgers did have Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and Will Smith and Max Muncy and, a lot of good players, Trey Turner, and yet they didn't hit when they needed to. Had plenty of guys in scoring position, just didn't get them in. And so would JD have made a difference? I don't know. But if he was deployed right, I guess, and part of the problem was center field was a big black hole for the Dodgers offensively in that series. And JD Martinez wasn't going to help much with that. Chris Taylor can play center, but it's not like Chris Taylor would have been the answer. Like JD is a DH, and I don't know that there would have been enough defensive flexibility to move guys around in order for JD to really fill the holes that the Dodgers actually had in that series.
Yeah. If you just take it at face value, would JD Martinez have gotten a hit, one hit extra with runners in scoring position? Probably, which might have changed at least one game in the series potentially. But again, it wasn't, it would have been a lot of other moving around that had to have happened in order for him to have fit on the roster, just the way they deployed it last year.
Yeah, and even saying he probably would have got one of those hits, you could say the same thing. Would Mookie Betts or Freddie Freeman or Will Smith or Trey Turner or Max Muncy have gotten one extra hit with runners in scoring position? You'd say, of course they would. One of them would have for sure, and none of them did. So it's who knows what would have happened. But all right, next question. I like this one from Brandon Johnson at Brandon John 442. Brandon's been sending us good questions in ever since we were the Scully Avenue podcast. He's probably been listening to us for as long as anybody. he says, is there any world where Andrew Friedman would trade for Aroldis Chapman this trade deadline?
There is a world that it does happen. I don't know if it's the one we're currently living in. But if you believe in other dimensions and things of that nature, then yeah, I do think that it's possible. And I don't know, I don't know how deep they would go into, changing as a person and everything else. But just based on what happened last year with the Yankees, and that might have been an issue more of like communication between Yankees and Chapman, and maybe just a frayed relationship in general. But he basically said, if I'm not going to pitch if I'm not going to be on the roster, then I'm not going to go to the workouts or whatever the case, or I'm going to get there when I want to get there type deal. So that's on top of the issues that prevented them from trading for him the first time, and the fact of the matter that Friedman doesn't normally trade for a big time reliever anyways, and the fact that some of the reliever trades he has made haven't quite worked out for the Dodgers. I don't see it happening, but there's like a 1% of me that wouldn't be surprised if it came up, or if they're not linked to him at least.
Yeah, we're more than 7 years removed from the big baggage, the reason they didn't trade for him in the first place. I don't think that would still keep them from getting him. For me, it really boils down to the price, because we do know that Andrew Friedman has said publicly he doesn't like trading for relievers because they're so volatile. I don't know that it gets more volatile than Aroldis Chapman. Even this year, he's got a 2.95 ERA, which is solid. He's got a 1.97 FIP, which is really good. But he also has a 5.9 walks per nine. It's like he's walking way too many guys. And this is 3 straight years of walking way too many guys. He's striking out a ton. It hasn't given up a home run this year. So that's why his FIP is low, because he, obviously doesn't give up many hits because he throws a zillion miles an hour. But he hasn't given up a home run, and that's been the big thing. Would that continue? Who knows? For me, it would come down to, if the Royals are asking for anything even resembling the price of an elite reliever, no way in the world. But if it's bargain bin, and if there's enough baggage around him for all these reasons I just mentioned, that they could get him for a reasonable price, I wouldn't be surprised if they went after it. But really, it comes down to what the Royals are asking.
Yeah. All right, we'll do one more question about another player. This guy is struggling, not so much baggage, but Louis at Louis993 asked, you think the Dodgers would consider Javy Baez?
Javy Baez so far this year has basically been Miguel Rojas, except getting paid a crap load of money. He's been terrible at the plate this year. He's got a 63 OPS plus. He doesn't take walks. He's never taken walks. He strikes out too much. Javy Baez, other than playing good defense and having a lot of power, the Dodgers like those things. Even that, though, he has 3 home runs this year, but he's basically the opposite of the Dodgers style of a player. He strikes out a ton, doesn't walk much. Dodgers don't mind the strikeouts, but you got to pair it with walks. And Javy Baez has a 270 on base percentage. He has a 300 career on base percentage. He's not, even at his best, he finished second in the MVP voting in 2018. His on base percentage that year was 326. I mean, he got those votes based on excellent defense and some power and stuff. I don't know. Dodgers already have a good defensive shortstop who can't hit. I don't know that they need to trade for a good defensive shortstop who can't hit and also gets paid $25 million a year.
Yeah, it would take a lot, for the Tigers to pay down that contract for the Dodgers to even consider it. And the main consideration I would give, which may or may not, is probably not rational, but you could talk yourself into being rational, is that the one time he was traded midseason, he was really good. He had a 371 on base percentage for the Mets in 47 games, 886 OPS, 140 OPS plus, and he looked, really good that after being traded in a season. So if that would be the most rational reason why the Dodgers could go after him.
Yeah. Oh, also $25 million a year for another 4 years after this year too. Yeah. So count me out on that one.
Yeah. James Outman, topic of conversation. We're going to talk about him. A few questions from you guys asking about him. So that's what's on tap. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Have you ever decided to go to an event last minute and the venue doesn't have any more tickets, but it's not the 1990s anymore? You don't have to wait for the venue to have tickets. You can just get tickets on any third-party app. And if you are going to use a third-party app, you need to be using Game Time, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. They got killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, so you don't have to stress over tickets, and you can start getting hyped for all the fun you're about to have. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy the tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone. You don't have to dig through your email. They're already there for you directly in the app. And with the Game Time guarantee, you always get the best price, because if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So they'll buy you something with that extra 10% if you find cheaper tickets somewhere else. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app right now, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off with the Game Time app. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Make sure to become a part of the Everydayers by listening to us every single day, wherever you get podcasts, and on YouTube and on the SXM, Sirius XM, if you search Locked On Dodgers, which is also where you can listen to Dodger games. The home broadcast for every Dodger game, Sirius XM or the SXM app. Just search Dodgers. Reds. Dodgers are playing in Cincinnati, which means some 4 o'clock games, which means you might need to listen on the way home from work. So Sirius XM got you covered. Sirius XM, SXM app, search Dodgers and get the home broadcast. All right, Jeff, I'll keep on with the questions here. We got a couple that tailored toward James Outman. One from our buddy Kevin at Blue Goon 82 says, what happens if Outman continues to struggle? He adds, Hayward's more suited for the corner in a platoon. Same with Peralta. Taylor can't hit enough to play every day. DeLuca's an unknown. Is it Outman or bust? And then another question from Aaron at MV17 up NXT. Second part of another question, so we'll go to that part. So, say Outman continues to struggle at the plate. How long do you imagine his leash to be extended? We can get into a little bit of Miguel Vargas as well in that sense.
Yeah, Outman, I think he's going to bounce back at least somewhat. I don't think he's going to hit like he did in April, but I do think he'll bounce back. I wouldn't say it's Outman or bust. I think I get what Kevin's saying about Hayward being more suited to a corner, but also Hayward has played pretty well in center field. They have, Chris Taylor not hitting enough to play every day is probably currently true, but not necessarily going to remain true. Who knows? But I think between Outman, Taylor, and Hayward, they have plenty to cover center field. I don't know that it's ideal if Outman doesn't bounce back. I think center field is a position you'd like to have as kind of a keystone and have a guy to hit well enough to play every day. I did, Kevin in a different question asking about trade targets. He throws out the name Cody Bellinger, which is one that I semi half jokingly mentioned in my preseason predictions episode as the Dodgers midseason acquisition would be Cody Bellinger. And, Bellinger's, I think he's still hurt because I was watching the Cubs today and Christopher Morel was still playing center field. But Bellinger was hitting pretty well before he got hurt. Where have we heard that story before? A guy like Bellinger could become available if the Cubs aren't in the running, and he's only signed for 1 year. It's not crazy to think the Dodgers could trade for Bellinger. That would be an interesting thing, and it's so yeah. I don't think it's Outman or bust, but I do think they need Outman to play a lot better than he's played the last few weeks.
Yeah, I think it's Outman or bust for now. For at least the next month, till everything starts rounding itself into place. I think there's a chance for Johnny DeLuca to take some playing time away from James Outman if he plays well. And then, if he plays well against his spots against lefties, realistically, he's going to face some righties in a couple of those games if he stays into the later parts of the game. And if Outman continues struggling and DeLuca's not struggling, I could see them trying him out there. So there's different ways for them to go about it. Realistically, if Outman doesn't figure it out, if DeLuca's not that guy, Hayward, Peralta, they're good, but you can't count on them yet. And then Chris Taylor. It depends what you're thinking about. If you're thinking about regular season and winning, Chris Taylor is fine. He has a 98 OPS plus now, and I'm pretty sure Cody Bellinger was nowhere near that the last 2 years on the Dodgers as the main center fielder, and they still won a lot of games in the regular season. Everything in postseason, obviously, yeah, that's a little bit different question. But when it comes down to it, I think they're going to make a deal, and then this next month or so, next month and a half, is going to decide, are we looking for a center fielder that can hit? Are we looking for any outfielder that we can hit? Are we looking for anybody that can play outfield or shortstop that can hit? Or are we looking for two-bat? There's going to be different questions that get answered here in the next 6 weeks. Hopefully Outman can at least get to, find a middle ground between his first month of the season and his next month. But that also remains to be seen. And then on the Miguel Vargas front, it's one of those two where he's good enough right now, but realistically, they're not going to go out and trade for like 3 or 4 bats, and I don't see that happening. Guess they could go the route the Braves did in 2021 and try to find the cheap bats that maybe could catch fire in a postseason series. Soler, Rosario, Jock, all those types of guys, but I don't see that happening.
Yeah, Vargas, I think, is going to get more rope than Outman just because he was a more highly touted prospect, and there's a reason for that. It's because Vargas is a better pure hitter than Outman, and so they have higher expectations for Vargas going forward. But yeah, I think both of them are going to get quite a bit of leash, at least for the next little while. Let's lump a couple together. Another part of Aaron's question asking who gets sent down when Julio returns. And Derek at D_Frank34 asks who gets sent down when Dustin May comes back. And so both of those we've touched on a little bit, but it's two different questions that kind of address the whole rotation thing.
Yeah, one's easier to answer in the fact that we don't know when Dustin May's coming back, and we don't know who's going to be in the rotation when Dustin May comes back. So, the fact that he's on the 60-day IL means he's not coming back till July anyways at the earliest. Realistically, I wouldn't expect him back that early anyways. So can't answer that one. But when it comes down to Julio, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, I honestly think Syndergaard's going to get a phantom IL stint to keep him on the roster, but to not, have to release him or somebody claims him potentially. I think they want to keep him on the roster for some insurance in case some of these other arms, somebody gets hurt, or in case they have a need for like a 6-man rotation, or Bobby Miller needs to take a breather at some point, assuming he continues to pitch well. So, I think Syndergaard to the IL when Julio's back.
Yeah. And yeah, the May question really comes down to, well, who's healthy at the time and who hasn't been jettisoned already. And because, May probably not back before the trade deadline, at least not too far before the trade deadline. And so, it may be Corbin Burns who is in the rotation at that point or somebody like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right, we got time for a quick one. This one's more up your alley as our resident baseball knowledge person from the Palooka at Joseph Luca 1. First question, as far as the pitch clock rules, if the clock doesn't reset until the pitcher receives the ball on the mound, could he take a trip on the grass around the mound and get a breather before stepping on the hill?
No, I don't know the exact wording of the rule, but I don't think the pitcher has to be on the mound. I think it's when the pitcher gets the ball back from the catcher. And so, and I definitely know that they will call shenanigans on anybody trying to circumvent the pitch clock. And so I don't think there are loopholes. I think they've identified most of those potential loopholes. And I do think there's some umpire discretion if somebody is, something that's not addressed clearly in the written rule, but the umpire sees that they're trying to mess with something, he'll say, hey, knock that off and call them out on it. So I don't think there's much way around that.
Yeah. And then his other question, how much of the pitch sequence comes from the catcher as opposed to the bench? He always wonders as he sees the catcher looking to the dugout before giving a sign or nowadays pushing a button.
Yeah, and that depends on the team and the catcher and everything. As far as I know, from what I've seen, both Will Smith and Austin Barnes basically call their own games. When they look over to the dugout, it's more along the lines of, in some situations, the bench will want to call for make a pickoff throw to give our reliever more time to warm up, or go out and talk to the pitcher, or or intentionally walk the guy or whatever. But for the most part, the Dodgers catchers are calling their own games. And so very little of that is coming from the bench during the game. Obviously, there's a ton of input from the coaching staff and the scouting staff during the meetings leading up to a game to prepare for it. But in game, the catchers are doing the vast majority of the work.
Yeah. All right, we got a few more questions from you guys, but first we're going to talk about BetterHelp. Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. And when you think about yourself and you think about your life and how much time do you spend on yourself in a given week versus how much time you spend on other people, and how you find that balance between the two. And it's, especially if you're someone like me who's a people pleaser, it's easy to get caught up with what everyone else needs from you, never really think about what you need. I'm one to say that I celebrate my birthday bigger, or for like a week at least every year, just because throughout the rest of the year I'm kind of worried about everybody else and taking care of everybody else. But during that, week around in February, I'm trying to do it myself. So it's hard to always be giving. It can leave you feeling stretched out thin. It can leave you feeling burnt out. It can feel you leaving, in a bit of a different mood, or, not as joyful as you can be. So BetterHelp can help you out, because therapy can be a benefit, and it can, somebody talking with you can always help out. And if it's a licensed therapist, they're more likely to help out, because that's what they're trained to do. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you got to do is go to BetterHelp and fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Find more balance with BetterHelp. That's visit betterhelp.com/lockedonmlb today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonmlb. Remember, SiriusXM, SXM app, search Dodgers. You can listen to any Dodgers game, the home broadcast for those games. You can also find Locked On Dodgers on there if you search Locked On Dodgers. You can also find us Ready Fan Podcast and on YouTube. Listen every day, become a part of the everydayers, and you'll be some of our favorite people in this world. So go do all that stuff. And let's get back to the questions, Jeff. We got one from Troy Sato. This will be an interesting one. It says, does it seem as though the Dodger defense gets exposed more when they play better teams because they aren't out slugging the other team? He adds, I know analytics don't necessarily take defense into account, but he misses the old days when the Dodgers infield started the same four guys and they were all good defensively.
Yeah, a couple things where I quibble with the question itself. Analytics does take defense into account. There are plenty of ways that defense is measured these days. Interestingly, often the guys who, like Max Muncy last year, a lot of people were poo-pooing his third base defense, but he actually graded out pretty well. He actually played pretty well. He wasn't going to win a Gold Glove or anything. And maybe that, it comes down to, well, he's not as good as Machado or Arenado or Key Brian Hayes or whatever. But, he was solid. And I think he's been mostly solid after, the first couple of weeks of the season this year. Muncy really struggled. But since then, he's been pretty solid. Not Gold Glove quality, but holding it down just fine and more than making up for it with his bat. So analytics does cover that. The other thing that I kind of quibble with is, starting the same four guys and them all being really good defensively. I think that it has more to do with nostalgia than reality sometimes. And it depends on which era we're talking about. I assume if we're talking about the same four guys starting all the time, maybe he's going back to the 70s and the big four of Steve Garvey, Davey Lopes, Bill Russell, and Ron Cey. Ron Cey was very good defensively. Bill Russell became good later in his career, wasn't very good to start with. Davey Lopes was fine. Steve Garvey was very good at scooping balls, won Gold Gloves. There's only so much that a defense a first baseman can provide, and Steve Garvey was fine. But I do think that maybe that is exaggerated in the minds of people who remember it a little bit. And also, I think it's worth noting that those big four won one World Series, and that was in their 8th or 9th year together. And so, going back to the actual basis of the question, does defense get exposed more against better teams? That might be true. Closer games, every little bit can hurt. And so, although, I mean, this game against the Yankees, it was a throwing error by Brusdar Graterol that really hurt them in that one. There was a play earlier in the game that, did they call an error on that? The one that got between Muncy and Taylor? I think they did call an error on that, which, I wouldn't be surprised if that gets changed since it didn't end up leading to a run. So it won't affect anybody's ERA or anything. I wouldn't be surprised if they change that to a hit since nobody actually got a glove on it. But again, that one didn't lead to a run. It didn't actually impact the game. The big play that hurt them was a throwing error by the pitcher. And that's, it has nothing to do with infield defense. And Brusdar is actually, he kind of leads the majors in comebackers. And so he actually plays his position pretty well. He just made a bad choice to throw that ball instead of eating it. In a perfect world, they'd have 9 Gold Glovers, at every position. But realistically, I don't think the Dodgers defense is a huge issue for them so far this year.
Yeah. And then even in recent memory, you think last year, Trey Turner, like, he just made errors in crucial spots. So yeah, it was exposed in the sense that he made errors in the playoffs.
And every Gavin Lux error led to 18 runs.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Dodgers never had a point in the 90s, or even if they did have a point in the 90s where everybody was playing and they were good defensively, they weren't good as a team. It hasn't happened in the early 2000s, and it really hasn't happened in this string because Seager was a shortstop for most of this string of recent success, and he's not good defensively. He's just kind of there.
And it was Hanley Ramirez before that.
Yeah.
I think we just have time for one more question. This one came to our email from Stephanie Heider. She has my question about Alex Vesia. She went to the games on Friday and Saturday with her dad, who's a Yankees fan. And she has seen Vesia a couple times at Oracle Park. She lives in Portland, but she's been to a couple games at Oracle Park this year and seen Vesia interact with the fans. She said a Giants fan asked him who his pitching inspirations were. I remember being impressed with how thoughtful his answer was and how much time he took with the guy. 2 pitchers he named that stood out to me are CC Sabathia and David Price. Anyway, I've been so upset for him this season. I was really nervous on Saturday, but he looked sharp and seemed to be back in command. But because I was at the game instead of watching on TV, I didn't get any commentary or insights about what he might have been doing differently in his approach, if anything. I want to get your thoughts on whether he might be starting to turn things around, if he just had a lucky outing, or if you noticed something different. And major reason I want to read this one is because I think, Vince, you and I are both in a similar boat to Stephanie in that we weren't watching that game on TV. I was, listening on the radio at times. I was at my son's baseball tournament, and I was mostly just following along on the MLB app as much as I could, and watching with the volume down when I was watching. And I think you were at a soccer match or something, hockey game. I don't know. But yeah, so I don't know, but I do think that with Vesia, what we've seen in the past for him, a stint in the minors can get him turned around. And obviously it didn't happen immediately this time, but I do have hope for that.
Yeah. And like we talked about last time, Roberts alluded to the pitch clock being an issue with him. He had a conversation with Vesia, and that he didn't say directly, but that was basically what the gist of it was that the pitch clock was really messing with him. And he's a guy that likes to slow the game down. If he can find a way to slow the game down in his own way that's still within the pitch clock parameters, I feel like he'll be better. But again, with Ferguson and Victor Gonzalez being better than him right now, and even Brule, at least this season, have been comparable to him, he and the Dodgers being in a close race at the moment, he kind of has to figure it out sooner rather than later.
Yep.
All right. Left a couple questions on the table, but nothing we can't get into or might get into at some point this week or in the next. So thank you guys for all your questions. Again, thank you all for listening. Thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Dodgers are in Cincinnati for the next 3 days, so we'll have some earlier games for those on Pacific time. So I think Hunter Green got skipped in his start, so we're not going to see Hunter Green, and the Dodgers are going to face some other guys. John DeLuca will get his first start on Wednesday. Hopefully, maybe get an at-bat on Tuesday at some point. So there's things to look forward to in this series. The Reds are playing well as of late, but the Dodgers still have a better team, should be able to take care of business. So thank you all for listening. Becoming every day by listening every day. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. You can also find us on SiriusXM or the SXM app, which is where you can find Dodger Home Broadcast if you search for Dodgers. You can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vincent91. DMs are open on all those accounts. You can also get a hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us. When you get in your car, if you're at home, tell your smart device play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.